Is everyone in? Dure? Okay.
Yes, still accepting. So you can start, Petros, anytime.
All right. Okay. So let's make a start. Welcome, everyone, to tonight's event of the Association for Bilingualism in Cyprus. My name is Petros Karatsareas. I'm a senior lecturer in English language and linguistics at the University of Westminster in London, and I'm delighted to be moderating tonight's event on the Turkish language and its dialects. We have excellent speakers tonight with us who are going to take us on a trip around the Mediterranean Sea and the Balkan Peninsula, talking about the richness and variety of the Turkish language. For those of you who are celebrating today, may I take this opportunity to wish you a happy Bayram and Eid Mubarak, as we say in the UK. For those of you who are joining an event of the association for the first time, I'd like to say a few words about the fascinating and excellent work that the association is doing in Cyprus towards promoting the learning, teaching of Turkish and Greek on Cyprus. So the association is a non-governmental organization that was set up by a group of Turkish Cypriot and Greek Cypriot translators, teachers of Turkish and Greek, academics in linguistics, and also generally people who want to learn Turkish and Greek and who espouse a culture of peace and support the dialogue between the different communities of Cyprus. The association promotes the learning of the two languages and also looks at issues of translation and interpreting from one language to the other, and has been very active over recent years in organizing workshops, events, public activities like this one, including activities for children. And it's been a delight to see that the COVID-19 pandemic did not affect the running of the association. The team have kept their activities over the past year. So tonight we're joined by Doctors Maria Petru, Çiçekçavuşoğlu, Hasan Kayli, and Ahmet Güneyli, who are going to present on their work and research on different varieties of Turkish, including Cyprus, Rhodes, and other parts of the Balkan and wider Eastern Mediterranean. Each speaker will present their contribution for about 15 to 20 minutes, and there will be some time for discussion at the end. So I can kindly ask everyone to turn off their mics so that we have a smooth event tonight. So without further ado, I'm going to start with the first speaker of today's event, Dr. Maria Petru, who's going to talk to us about Turkish varieties in Turkey and the Balkans. Maria Petru is a Turkologist and linguist and a founding member of the Association of Bilingualism in Cyprus. She currently works as a postdoctoral senior researcher in LÖVE, Excellence Research Cluster, Minority Studies, Language and Identity at the Department of Methods of International Comparative Social Research of the Justus Liebig University of Gießen in cooperation with the Goethe University, Frankfurt in Main. After completing her studies at the University of Cyprus, double major and double master's degrees in Turkish linguistics and Oriental studies in Frankfurt, she did a fieldwork-based PhD on the Turkish dialect of Western Thrace in Greece, and she recently published a peer-reviewed monograph on this dialect in Germany. Maria Petru has worked as a special scientist at the Department of Turkish and Middle Eastern Studies of the University of Cyprus, as a teaching and research associate, temporary lecturer at the Department of Türkology of the University Justus Liebig in Gießen. So her research interests include Turkish linguistics, dialectology, and social linguistics. She has conducted extensive fieldwork on previous undescribed linguistic varieties of Turkish and specializes in descriptive and contrastive analysis. Her main focus is on Balkan Turkish, and we're looking forward to hearing more about it in her contribution. Maria, thank you very much, and over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much for the beautiful introduction, and thank you, Julia, for the invitation. I'm really very happy to be here with you today. And yes, in today's presentation, varieties, Balkans, and before doing so, I will. By using the term, the sociolinguistic term variety, I mean both the regionally distinctive varieties and the system of linguistic expressions governed by social and situational variables. As you most probably know, our language and the way we speak is not only determined by the place we live, but also by social factors and by settings that the communication takes place. And according to whom we talk to and when and where we are, we switch our register if we can, usually in order to accomplish optimal communication and be within the linguistic communicative form norms that we hold as appropriate in the given moment. And the language is a powerful tool through which we converge to others' communicative behaviors in order to achieve communication, but also through which we diverge and show, for example, our interlocutors that we are different socially. Communication is a constant negotiation of identities where we actually apply different accommodation strategies depending on our motives or intentions. And accordingly, we can switch from standard language to our local variety or to colloquial standard and to different styles. And this is just to say that language is a complex system and not just a linguistic notion. So in the first part of the presentation, I will introduce the main groups of the regional varieties. And in the second part, I will talk about the language variation that can be attributed to social factors. And I will take as an example the Turkish spoken in Western Thrace. And Turkish has two major dialect groups, the Anatolian Turkish and the Balkan Turkish. And the Anatolian Turkish is usually classified into the West Central, East, and the Northeastern zone. But here you see the classification of Leyla Karahan, where we have a division into three main groups with various subgroups. And yeah, the West part, the West group, comprises dialects that are spoken in West Anatolia, Central, the Eastern part, and the Northeastern group here comprises the dialects of Eastern Black Sea coast, and what you see with blue is the East group. It is impossible to go through the linguistic features of Anatolian dialects within this presentation. I will only mention a couple of phonetic features of each group. For instance, a linguistic feature of the West group is the voicing of the initial unvoiced plosives, k and t. I will not be reading all the examples. The backing of the front rounded and u. The reduced vowel inventories are, by the way, common in many Turkish varieties, and in the whole of Central Anatolia, retraction seems to be almost a rule in initial syllables after front velar stops. A phonological phonetic characteristic of the northeastern group is also the partial and total backing of the front rounded vowels and u, but it rarely takes place next to velar stops. In these varieties, the occurrence is very common word initially, as you see in the examples. Another characteristic of the varieties in Trabzon and Rize is the fronting of the back closed unrounded vowel, fricativization of the plosive in word and syllable final position, like in Çiçek and Vereceksin, is characteristic of East group of Anatolian varieties. And here I would like to mention also a morphological feature, which is the omission of the interrogative particle me, and the questions are then expressed by intonation. And as you most probably know, this is a very common phenomenon in Cypriot Turkish as well, and due to the contact with the Cypriot Greek. And it is also a phenomenon that I have observed in yes/no questions during my fieldwork on Western Thrace Turkish, mostly, but not only, in the Basilectic and Mesolectic varieties. An example is Sizunanca Biliyanis. Can you speak Greek for the standard Turkish? Sizunanca biliyor musunuz?
Maria, your sound is a little bit muffled.
Like usual. I don't know what I could do.
Okay, just wanted to make you aware that it's a little bit. We can hear what you're saying, but the quality is not optimal.
Okay.
If there's anything you can do that you could fix it, but if not, no worries.
Let me try something again. It happened to me in a previous. Does it make any difference?
Yes, it's better, I think.
Better?
Yeah.
Good. Since I have mentioned Western Thrace Turkish, which is a Balkan Turkish dialect, let's see the classification of this group as well, which goes back to the Hungarian psychologist Gyula Mehmet, according to whom the Balkan Turkish, also called the Rumelian Turkish, can be divided into two main groups, a Western and an Eastern dialect group. The Western Romanian Turkish is spoken in northwestern Bulgaria, northern Romania, Macedonia, Kosovo, Bosnia, and possibly Albania. And the Eastern Romanian group, according to Dockler, consists of varieties spoken in Eastern Thrace, that is the European part of Turkey, Western Thrace in Greece, northeastern and southeast and southern Bulgaria, southeastern Romania, and Gagauz, which is spoken mainly in South Moldova, is considered to be an Eastern Romanian dialect as well. And let's see some features of Western Romanian as opposed to Eastern. We have a merger of the closed vowels with E in word final position, a non-harmonic perfect suffix mish, so mish is invariant, backing of E in a non-initial and closed final syllables, partial and full backing of O and U, suffixes with low vowel harmony show a generalized form, especially the plural suffix lar occurs in its palatal form. We have raising of and U, preservation of the historic which is not going to be in modern Turkish, the so-called yumuşak. And we have also fronting of the palatal stops k and gu to palatal affricates, for example, juice for girls and chubek for Quebec. And now a few words about Western phrase Turkish and variation triggered by social factors. Western phrase Turkish is spoken in the northeastern part of the Greek mainland in the regional units of Xanthi, Rhodope, and Evros, and besides sharing common features with other Romanian dialects, Western phrase Turkish displays conduct-induced phenomena from Greek. And some of them are conditioned by the degree of bilingualism, and some of them are not. The Turkish-speaking community of Western phrase is not only bilingual, Turkish Greek, but also seems to display some classic Dialects features. A striking feature of this diglossic situation is that the Turkish of the region is the mother tongue of all members of the speech community, whereas standard Turkish is acquired first when they go to school. And many members of the speech community, especially the elderly, have only a passive or limited command of the standard language, due to the fact that they dropped out of school at an early age. In fact, until the 70s, there was a tendency to visit only the primary school. So there are speakers who understand, of course, standard Turkish, but they cannot change their register fully to the standard language. The younger generation, who is influenced by the standard language to a greater degree due to education, for example, they avoid the use of marked features. And in this way, some basilectic features, especially phonetic ones, undergo leveling. For example, in the villages of Ipio and Ariana, both southeast of Komodini, the realization of the velar plosive g in initial position, like in Bus and Barum, which is characteristic for this village, is avoided by the educated or the younger generation. So the developing acrolectic variety rejects more and more basilectic features, and the phonetic differences between basilectal and basilectal varieties and the acrolect sometimes create lexical doublets. For example, we have basilectic buba, acrolectic baba, Q, Curry, Suvan, Soan, Çocuk, Çocuk, Güzel, Güzel. And what bilingualism is concerned, whether the Greek language skills are passive or active, depends on social factors such as mobility, social interaction with Greek-speaking people, the place of living, and the educational level. And the speakers who have no or passive command of Greek can nevertheless use Greek words denoting, for example, institutional and administrative terms like dimarchio, town hall from Greek dimarchio, taftada, ID card from Greek taftodita. Passive speakers, especially of the older generation, also use Greek loanwords, which tend to be avoided in the speech of the younger generation, who prefer their standard Turkish equivalents, even if they have active command of Greek, and such words are potir in correlation with kudir, denoting drinking glass, or the kudal, spoon. Of course, some Greek loanwords are used regularly by both passive and active speakers, along with their standard Turkish equivalents, such as tomata in variation with tomates, sakula, pochette. Speakers who have active command of Greek show a high frequency of intrasentential and intersentential code switching, especially if they receive education in Greece only and live in an urban area. And I say in Greece only because many of them do receive education in Turkey. I display a short dialogue from two young speakers living in Motini. The Greek insertions are marked with the orange color. Ben evlenmekten korktum file. I am afraid of marriage, my friend. Niyere, why Masa sovaros tora, kendi mezor baki, kadinaga bagajan. Are you serious now? I can hardly take care of myself. How could I then take care of a woman as well? And yeah, apart from the Greek insertions, you see once again that we have a question expressed without the question participle ni, kadinata bagajam, and the verbs korkum and bakim are marked with the present suffix e, which usually shows that the communication is taking place in the apoplectic level. And yeah, taking the regional unit of Rhodope as an example, the Basilex spoken there displays present suffixes such as I, ia, ia, e. And if we take the verb gelmek as an example, we have a gele, gelie, gelie, geli, geli for a standard Turkish geliyor. And but the acrolect rejects all these forms and accepts only the geli form. And there is also the present suffix iyo, which is phonetically and morphologically the closest form to the standard Turkish iyor. And this form seems to carry a more complex sociolinguistic function compared to e, because depending on the speaker, the interlocutor, the linguistic setting, and the locality from which a speaker comes from, it serves either as a basilectic or an acrolectic variant, or even it signals that it may signal that the speaker changes his register into colloquial standard Turkish. Yeah, so basilectic features and regionally determined variation are receding in favor of linguistic features which are linguistically and socially closer or identical to those of the standard variety. Non-standard varieties or dialects usually have a lower prestige than the standard language because they are wrongly considered to be wrong or the speech of the uneducated. But actually, they are language systems which are developing naturally, in a natural way. They are very rich in linguistic features, and they tell us many things about our history and our identity. And so they deserve much more appreciation. Yeah, this was a short introduction into the Turkish varieties, just to open the way to my colleagues to go deeper into specific varieties. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Maria. That was excellently timed. So bang on time. Thank you very much. I think it's best to save questions for the end, so there's a nice discussion and a more organic relation between the contributions. So if that's okay with everyone, please hold your questions for the Q&A session at the end of the after the last contribution. So we now move on to the next speaker, who is my colleague and friend, Çiçek Çavuşoğlu, and I'm delighted to be introducing her to you tonight. Çiçek completed her BA in English language teaching and her master's in educational sciences at Eastern Mediterranean University. After working at the Department of English language teaching at Near East University between 2004 and 2006, she received a Fulbright FLTA scholarship and worked at Binghamton University, State University of New York for 1 academic year as a teaching assistant for Turkish language. Upon the completion of her PhD, which was funded by the Economic and Social Research Council of the United Kingdom at King's College London in 2010 on ethnicities and language learning among young people from Turkish Cypriot backgrounds, she returned to Near East University as a faculty member. She's currently the chairperson of the Department of English Language Teaching, the head of the Education Unit, and a member of the Research Center for Applied Linguistics at Near East University. She has supervised various MA theses focusing on different aspects of English language teaching in different contexts. Her research interests include the relationship between ethnicity, culture, everyday language use, and the way language is utilized for different sociological and educational purposes within multicultural and multilingual settings. Her latest publications include titles such as Teachers' Perceptions on Using First Language in Northern Cyprus EFL Classrooms and Stigmatization and Othering the Case of Syrian Students in Turkish Schools. And tonight she will be talking to us about attitudes towards Cypriot Turkish, the case of a non-standard variety. Over to you, Çiçek.
Thank you very much, Petros. Can everybody hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. So let me share my screen. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm very delighted to be here with everyone. And thank you, Maria, for presenting such a comprehensive, actually, when you look at it, presentation on different varieties of Turkish, which in a way actually paved the way to us to present different varieties from our perspectives. And as Petros said, today I will be talking about Cypriot Turkish and attitudes towards it. But before we start, the way that I actually organized my presentation is to start with some background information about language attitudes and then move on to some characteristics of Cypriot Turkish and why we call it a different variety from the standard, and then move on to people's attitudes towards Cypriot Turkish, both from the point of view of Turkish Cypriots and from the point of view of mainland Turkish standard speakers. So what are language attitudes and why are they important for us? Language attitudes are beliefs generally about how languages sound, and they have practical implications for the speakers of those varieties, because when you hear someone speaking in a specific manner, you tend to develop certain ideas about them, and you start to categorize them based on their speech patterns. And these have, as I said, practical implications in the long term about people's self-esteem, about their feelings of belonging, that we have literature on how it affects educational attainment and how it affects employment opportunities positively or negatively, and how people tend to place certain speakers of certain varieties in specific socioeconomic statuses based on how they sound. But all of these are rooted in language ideologies, which I will come back to later, which are very strong beliefs, and they tend to direct policies, language policies in different contexts. So what are these standard languages, and how do they come to become standard, and why are they so valued? Obviously, the process of language planning, which I'm not going to get into right now because it's a completely different subject, is the root of standard languages. And in many cases, the emergence of standard language starts with the selection of a specific speech variety as the standard, and then goes on with the codification of the norm, where a written form is developed, and then implementation of this form in specific contexts and different media, and then the elaboration of different functions of language in different places. And in many cases, these standardized languages are implemented through specific social institutions and linguistic institutions, which in a way control the way that language develops, and they also advise the ways and they oversee the ways that language is managed within the society. But all of these processes, they are not always based strongly in linguistics only. They are based in social and historical events and the way that societies develop throughout time. Now, how did Standard Turkish come to become Standard Turkish? And today is the Turkish Language Day, actually 13th of May. So we're celebrating the Turkish Language Day with this event. The way the Standard Turkish as we know it did not actually start with the 1928 revolution, actually, change of the alphabet. That was a marking stone in the development of the language, but actually the language revolution started back in the Ottoman era, when certain writers and prominent poets started to use purely, in their minds, purely Turkish words, and tried to eliminate Farsi and Arabic words from the language. And they believed that this was the only way to make their work being read by larger groups of people. And then came the Republican era, where the alphabet was changed to match with the phonological features of the language. And then in 1933, the Turkish Language Institution was set up, which worked towards development of a standard Turkish and purification of the Turkish language from foreign words, and also the standardization process sort of institutionalized with the establishment of this organization. Now, if we come back to the Cypriot Turkish, then what are the differences between Standard Turkish and Cypriot Turkish? The features that I will be presenting here today are by no means exhaustive. There are many other things, but I'm going to highlight the most significant ones and the ones that we tend to realize very quickly when you hear someone speaking Cypriot Turkish. A lot of authors and people from the literature have argued that after the Ottoman era started in Cyprus and people from Anatolia started migrating, they brought their dialects, obviously, and their Turkish. And because of the current similarities, as Maria presented, for example, there are certain still certain similarities with the Anatolian dialects. And many people, many linguists in the Turkish linguistic literature have argued that these similarities are because they actually retained these characteristics from the original Turkish that they used to speak in Anatolia. But there was a long history of contact with different languages after they arrived in Cyprus. So they had contact with Greek Cypriots, which went on for centuries, and then came the British colonial rule in 1878, which brought English as the official language of the island, and many Turkish Cypriots started speaking English at the same time, so they had to borrow words. And also the island, as a Mediterranean island, it was a trade island for centuries, and there were lots of Italian, French, and obviously before the Ottoman era, there was the Lusignan period. So there was a mixture of a lot of languages on the island already when the Anatolian speakers of Turkish arrived. And long history of this contact ended up in borrowing from different languages. From Greek, for example, to date, we use words like Gangelli or Angoni or Bendo. These are regular words that we use every day. And from English, we borrowed words like isvich, which translates to switch, or mop. So nobody says, you know, yer süngeri or whatever in Turkish. Everybody says mop in Cyprus. And from other languages, from Arabic, Italian, Portuguese, there are a lot of borrowed words in Cypriot Turkish which are currently used in everyday life. There are differences in certain expressions and structures, especially in semantic forms. For example, in the standard, in an everyday language, you would say naber, but in Cypriot Turkish, you would say napan, which means what's up. And in some cases, these standard expressions, these Cypriot expressions sound very puzzling to the standard speakers when you hear it. For example, the word basmak, verb, as a verb, in standard Turkish, it means to raid some place, or being raided by the police, or catching someone doing something unethical. But in Cypriot Turkish, it means running someone over, usually with a car. So if you hear someone say, somebody was, you know, yolda basıldı in Cypriot Turkish, if the listener is a Cypriot Turkish person, he or she would think, would feel sad because somebody was run over. But if it was a standard Turkish speaker, he would feel, you know, surprised and maybe feel disapproval for whatever was happening. So these expressions differ in everyday life. There are phonological differences where certain words from Persian and Arabic were kept, but the pronunciation was changed, shortening the vowels. For example, instead of tatil, became tatil, like the holidays that we have right now. Similarly, we had changes in vowels and consonants. I'm not going to go over all of these, but you can see that some of these actually are similar to what Maria was earlier presenting, especially with ü, ö, and g, k, which are at the beginning of the words, usually changed to g instead of küçük, for example. A Cypriot Turkish person would say küçük. A very distinctive feature as well is the sound, which we usually have in English. Instead of saying geldin, which would end with an N, Cypriots would say gelding, which is more like an ing ending at the end. So this is also a distinctive feature that you hear a lot in Cypriot Turkish. And in terms of the structural differences, Cypriot Turkish tend to use an inverted sentence structure in relation to standard. So instead of subject, verb, object, subject, object, verb, we use subject, verb, object. So instead of eve gitmek istemiyorum, istemem gideyim eve. Right? So the word order is inverted, but also the tense use is different in Cypriot Turkish. And as Maria also mentioned, the questions, we tend to drop the question tags and not use m, mi, mu, mu, but just say çocuğunuz var. So with the intonation, give the question mark at the end. And with the suffixes as well, cik, which is a diminutive in Turkish, tends to be used a lot in Cypriot Turkish, and tends to change, whereas in standard Turkish it wouldn't change to fit the vowel harmony. In Cypriot Turkish it would. So, for example, in standard you would say alırken, while in Cypriot Turkish you would say alırkan. And in a similar way, when you are adding the suffixes to the words, such as putting together babam ile, making it babamla, in Cypriot Turkish, it would be babamnan. So not only the phonological changes, but also the structural changes happen when the suffixes are being added to the words. Now, coming to the focus of the presentation, the language attitudes towards Cypriot Turkish have been started to be researched and tried to be understood since 1930s. And at the beginning, according to Kızılyürek and Gaita Kızılyürek, they suggest that with the establishment of the new republic in Turkey, the Cypriot population in Cyprus tended to identify themselves as Turkish more and more. And they followed the changes, the social changes that were brought together with the new republic in the mainland. And at this time, of course, Cyprus was a British colony, but they were the Muslim citizens of the British Empire. But with this new identification, they become Turkish Cypriots. And this was, to some extent, a reaction to the rising nationalism among the Greeks. And also, it was towards a change into a more modernized community. And what happened as a result of this identification, and also campaigns such as Citizens Speak Turkish, people were Turkified, and their language was pushed towards more use of standard Turkish, as well as more Turkish words, because there was a lot of code switching and a lot of borrowed words used during their speech. And with the de facto separation of the island in 1974, they tended to see themselves more as the extension of the Turkish nation. So the Turkification of the Turkish Cypriot population in Cyprus continued with new policies, language policies, such as renaming villages, which used to be inhabited by Greeks or which used to be mixed into Turkish names. But still, at this time, the Cypriot Turkish was compared with the standard Turkish, and it's, according to the users, it was rough and rustic, and it was more like a peasant speech. But some things changed in the 1990s. The admirations that people felt towards standard speakers and the standard Turkish changed as more and more migrants from all over Anatolia came to Cyprus, and Cypriots felt like the Turkish that the migrants spoke did not match with the idealized speaker, the idealized standard Turkish that they aspired to. And I mean, there are, of course, other political and historical events behind this, but towards the end of 1990s, there was an increased loyalty towards Cypriotness and Cypriot Turkish as a language, as a linguistic practice that would show that they were Cypriots and they were different from these migrants who came from Anatolia. There aren't many studies actually that are done specifically on attitudes towards Cypriot Turkish. There are only a couple, and I'm going to present these here. The first one was Osam's in 2004, and he asked the participants in his study to rate the speakers of Standard Turkish and Cypriot Turkish according to certain traits. And he found that the speakers of the Standard sounded attractive, ambitious, intelligent, contemporary, friendly, credible. So all these positive attributes that you would give to socioeconomically high status people, and they were funny and affectionate. But Cypriot Turkish was found more friendly, honest, and affectionate, but it wasn't found polite. So one of the traits that we look at, especially in terms of standardization of languages, is politeness. And this was an indication that Cypriot Turkish was definitely not close to the standard version at this time. Now, about a decade later, I and my colleague Dimitris Devripilu, we carried out another study. Similar findings, except that we found that people thought that you could actually express serious things and engage in rich conversations even when you are using Cypriot Turkish, which previously people thought were only attributes of the Standard Turkish. And when we interviewed people, we found that especially in terms of identification as an ethnicity, language was a very important factor for Cypriots. They said that Cypriot Turkish differentiates them not only from Greeks, but also the mainland Turkish people. And it links them directly to the island that they live in and not to Turkey. And these are sentiments, I believe, because when you think about the time of the research that we did, it was almost after 10 years after the borders opened. So as I said, these political events and historical events have impact on the language attitudes of people. So at this time, they wanted to differentiate themselves from the Turkish speakers, the Standard speakers, and they felt proud. They felt proud of speaking this Cypriot dialect, and they said that this is who I am. But they were also aware that there is a continuum of registers, because they said that there is a difference between speakers of Cypriot Turkish in Nicosia and those in Karpaz or those in Morphu. So they are also aware of this continuum. Now, as I said, we carried out a similar study with Dimitris, this time from the mainland Turkish people who live in Cyprus and who have spent some time with Cypriot speakers. And what they said was very interesting, because they said Cypriot Turkish is an incorrect version of Turkish. It's not rich or appropriate. It's not for serious things. It's cute, but you cannot really sit and talk seriously or do a class in Cypriot Turkish for that matter. It was found inferior, less friendly, less appropriate, and for expressing honesty, less attractive, marginally more affectionate than Standard Turkish. So it rated lower in all traits that we measured compared to Standard Turkish, according to the mainland people. And what they said was, they're sweet, but they make grammar mistakes. They shouldn't be talking like that. And they must believe that we use the right way. They should speak like us. this was a very interesting thing because, as I said at the beginning of the presentation, it refers to how strong language ideologies can be in terms of rating and approaching people based on the variety that they speak. And they pointed out that the Cypriot dialect is uneducated, and they don't expect their teachers or teachers in Cyprus to use Cypriot dialect at all in class because it's not correct, and teachers are supposed to use correct language. That was one of the very interesting findings. They said this was not normal Turkish, and it was interesting because at the end, one of the participants said, yes, we have other dialects in Turkey as well, but this is like really, really bad. It's nothing like our dialects. So it was even, Cypriot Turkish was even rated at the bottom of the language variety continuum and variety of dialects in that sense. But these mainland participants were also aware that Cypriot, for Cypriot, Turkish Cypriots, their dialect is an important marker of their identity. Now, where do we go from here? If this variety is such an important element of life for these people, then we need to recognize it. Then we need to give it status so that it can be studied, it can be taught and learned, and it will not be seen as this incorrect version of another language. And we need to include it in the curriculum so that people can better understand different uses of language in everyday life. They already feel belonging to it, but we will be strengthening that belonging because we will be working with a language that people are using in their everyday already. They already have this belonging, so we will be acknowledging that belonging. And we will be preventing stigmatization because, as I said before, when someone speaks in standard Turkish, they are thought to be uneducated or lower educated, and these stereotypes can be prevented if we include them in our curriculum and in our education system. So thank you very much. I hope I was on time, Petros.
Thank you, Giselle. This was great. Thank you. Excellent. All right, so we'll move on straight to our next speaker, who is Dr. Hasan Kayle. Hasan is Assistant Professor of Linguistics at the Department of Mediterranean Studies of the University of the Aegean. He's a graduate of the Department of English Philology at Ege University and of the School of Linguistics, Department of Philology at the National and Capodistria University of Athens with a PhD in linguistics. He has taught Turkish at the Department of Mediterranean Studies at the University of the Aegean and at the Department of Turkish and Modern Asiatic Studies at the University of Athens. He has also taught Modern Greek at the Department of Modern Greek Philology. His interests lie in applied linguistics, comparative linguistics, second language acquisition, language contact phenomena, and the grammatical description of languages. He has conducted ethnographic type of research in the bilingual Greek and Turkish speaking Muslim community of the island of Rhodes in southeastern Aegean Sea. He has published extensively in these areas, including in journals like Second Language Research or the Journal of Greek Linguistics. He has contributed to edited volumes, among others, in the Second Language Acquisition of Turkish and the Dynamics of Interactional Humor, and also in conference proceedings, including the International Conference of Greek on Turkish Linguistics and Studies in Greek Linguistics. He's also the author of 4 books on teaching Greek and Turkish to speakers of other languages. And tonight he'll be presenting part of his work on Rhodian Turkish. Hasan, the floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Petros, for your presentation. Thank you. I would like also to thank the Association for Bilingualism in Cyprus, for the invitation. Today I will try to present some aspects of, let me share my screen, some aspects of the Rhodian Turkish, the Turkish spoken in Rhodes, Greece, and refer to some sociolinguistic aspects of it and some structural elements that seem to be highly influenced from Greek, naturally being the dominant language in the island. Sorry. I will start with some introductory data on historical events, then speak briefly about language contact to introduce some theoretical preliminaries, and then move to the characteristics of Rhodian Turkish that seem to be non-standard and are very much like the data which were presented by Maria and Chise for Cypriot Turkish as well. Well, who are the speakers of Rhodian Turkish? The Muslims of Rhodes, as they are referred to in literature, are Greek citizens of Turkish origin who have been living in Rhodes since 1522. Historically speaking, from 1522 to till 1912, the Deccanese islands was part of the Ottoman Empire, and the people of Turkish origin were the dominant group on the island, at least in the city area. In 1912, the Italians occupied the Deccanese, and the Turks were recognized as a religious community. Then they became Greek citizens after the annexation of the Dodecanese Islands in 1947. However, they were not deemed as covered by the Treaty of Lausanne, but special status was acknowledged as far as the Vakf and the schools were concerned. And that continued up to 1972, where the teaching of the Turkish language in Muslim schools was de facto abolished. And the situation changed much after that. And speaking of today, the estimated population on the island, I mean, Muslims with Turkish origin are about 3,000 people. The students of Turkish origin attend public schools, and the Turkish language is mainly used within the community, actually only within the community, as it's not formally taught or used in transactions with Greek-speaking majority, neither in formal or informal contexts. Consequently, in the last 70 years from 1947, almost the entire Muslim community has shifted from mere monolingualism in Turkish to bilingualism in Turkish and Greek. And the language has been influenced by Greek. Now, what do we mean with language contact? Most of you already know. For those who don't, is the use of two or more languages in a linguistic community at the same time, as Thomason puts it, in simple words. And in such situations, languages in contact influence one another. However, the outcomes of the language contact are not easy to predict. And as Maria said, social, and she says, well, social and linguistic factors determine the outcomes of the language contact. And one of them is structural copying, as Johansson names it. And I will concentrate on some of these structural characteristics of Rhodian Turkish, and let us begin mainly those attributed to Greek influence. Well, what happens most is the direct translation nowadays of Greek idioms into Turkish. Let us see examples 1 and 2. Okula ayakla gidiyorum. Instead of the standard okula yürüyerek gidiyorum, you can see the Greek idiom πάω στο σχολείο με τα πόδια. Again, in 2, Ayten beni yapıştırdı. As she said, an equivalent example, standard speakers of standard Turkish would not understand that example. Ayten beni yapıştırdı, şimdi ezele de bakıyor. And again, we see some phonological differences similar to those that Maria mentioned. Translated actually, the idiom με κόλλησε ο Πέτρος, τώρα βλέπω και το εζέλ. Δεν ξέρω αν το βλέπει ο Πέτρος, τέλος πάντων. Ayten, whereas in standard Turkish, it would be Ayten beni alıştırdı, şimdi ezeli de izliyorum. You see the verb yapıştırmak as in its Greek equivalent, με κόλλησε. This is one of the phenomena. Again, also in Rhodian Turkish, we have the omission of me in yes/no questions. We use intonation for stating questions, yes/no questions. Derslerini yaptın, as happens in Greek. Έκανες τα μαθήματά σου. Instead of using the me particle for these type of questions. A third phenomenon is the overuse of the which is the morpheme for stating past events in Turkish. Well, where is the influence of Greek here? Those who know Turkish know that in Turkish there is a grammatical morpheme for the evidential, and it is not used in many situations in Rhodian Turkish. Let us see example 4. Annem bu okulda okudu, and the speaker would not be a witness of this fact. Just exactly it happens in Greek. Η γιαγιά μου πήγε σε αυτό το σχολείο. Whereas in standard Turkish, one would say annem bu okulda okumuş, because it is stated. However, the use of the evidential market is not optional in situations where the event described by the utterance has not been eyewitnessed by the speaker. We use the in many cases where mush would be required. A fourth phenomenon is the misuse or non-use in many cases of causativity. I know that happens in Cypriot Turkish as well. We say saçımı kestim. Like if I got a pair of scissors and did it myself. But what is actually meant is that I went to a barber's and he did it for me. As in Greek, έκοψα τα μαλλιά μου. Instead of the standard Turkish, saçımı kestirdim. Another way of stating causativity is by using periphrastic constructions, as happens in Greek as well. Let us see example 6 now. Öğretmen proje koyuyor, öğrencilere yazsınlar. Standard speakers of Turkish would find it difficult to understand what is meant by this sentence, by this utterance. let us see its Greek equivalent. Ο δάσκαλος βάζει τους μαθητές να γράψουν έκθεση. And in standard Turkish, that would be öğretmen öğrencilere kompozisyon yazdırıyor using the causativity marker dır. But in Rhodian Turkish, in many cases, people prefer to use a complement clause instead. A fifth phenomenon is, again, the misuse of the plural marker, lar. For those who don't know Turkish, if a Turkish noun phrase contains a numeral or a quantifier, then the noun remains in singular, whereas in Turkish it is in plural. We have agreement in Greek. Let us see what I mean by this. Let us see 7a. İki adalar da harikaydı, whereas standard Turkish it would be iki ada da harikaydı. But in Rhodian Turkish, it is expressed in the way it is expressed in Greek. Και τα δύο νησιά ήταν υπέροχα. The same thing happens with the use of quantifiers as çok. We would say çok kitaplar okudum. Actually, this happens lately also in standard Turkish. I notice this a lot. I don't know why. 6, phenomenon 6, the replacement of a grammatical morpheme with the Greek equivalent, mainly changing cases. Let us see 8a, topufur. We have again several phonological differences, as in χτύπα την μπάλα, kick the ball. Whereas in Turkish, in standard Turkish, one would use the dative, the topavur, because vur, the verb vurmak, to kick, to hit, requires a dative. Or in the use of some postpositions, let us see 9a in this case, her hafta erkekler futbol için bahsediyorlar, instead of using the ablative as in 9c, her hafta erkekler futboldan bahsediyorlar, or in standard Turkish one would use the postposition hakkında, futbol hakkında konuşuyorlar, but için is used as happens with ya for and referring to. We have an overuse of some postpositions in this way. And some more syntactic phenomena. We have similar situations as in Cypriot Turkish. We have variations in complement clauses. We have a VO syntax with a finite complement, as in 10a. Annemler istemiyor çalışan. See the pattern as it is exactly in Greek. Οι γονείς μου δεν θέλουν να δουλέψω. Whereas in standard Turkish, it would be annemler çalışmamı istemiyor, using a non-finite verb type in the complement clause, or a finite verb in the optative, but still the syntax is different. We have a VO pattern. Or something which is quite anomalous, a VO syntax, but with a non-finite complement, as in 11a. İstiyon görmeyi çocuğunu. We have the main predicate in the beginning, then a finite verb type, and then the complement again, as happens again in Greek. Θέλεις να δεις το παιδί σου. Whereas in standard Turkish, it would be çocuğunu görmek istiyorsun. You want to see your child in many cases. And one more, there are many more, but I knew that we had a limited time, so I limited my examples. What happens again in embedded W questions? We have a Greek word order and a finite verb type instead of a non-finite, as in 12a. Anlamadım ne istedi, instead of ne istediğini anlamadım, as again happens in Greek. Δεν κατάλαβα τι ήθελε. Concerning the Rhodian Turkish, there are much more phenomena that we have discussed. Actually, this is not my personal work. Many researchers have contributed to this ethnographic research we do, namely Georgalidou, Marianthi, Chalteka Itats, Vasilis Spiropoulos, Anthire Vithiadou. But I wanted to limit my presentation with the phenomena that are related to contact and where Turkish is influenced from Greek. And thank you very much for listening. I don't know what happens with the time. Thank you very much. I can answer any questions. You can find me there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hassan. That's excellent. Thank you. So I'm mindful of the time, so I think I'll move on straight to our next speaker. Last but not least, Ahmet Güneyli. Ahmet was born in Nicosia in Cyprus. He graduated with a degree in teacher training in Cyprus, and then he did his master's and PhD in the Department of Turkish Language Teaching in the University of Ankara. He is now a faculty member at the Turkish Language Education Department of the European University of Lefke. He teaches Turkish language teaching, linguistics, children's literature, and teaching methods. He has published journal articles and book chapters in educational sciences, especially focusing on Turkish language teaching. He's also presented in conferences, both in Cyprus and internationally. He is a member of the Turkish Cypriot Teachers Union and also of the Association for Bilingualism in Cyprus. And he also publishes in Gayle, which is a monthly journal in North Cyprus, and he's a member of the editorial board of the journal as well. He's been involved in 2 projects on Cypriot Turkish. He's been involved in efforts to teach Cypriot Turkish. And he was the author of the Turkish teaching curriculum and textbooks. He has been since 2005. He was also involved in the project that produced a daily speaking guide in collaboration with Greek Cypriot partners. This was the first project in which the local regional varieties of Cyprus were valued on a par with the standardized varieties, the standard languages. For those of you who are not familiar with the guide, it's an excellent resource with teaching material in Cypriot Turkish, Standard Turkish, Cypriot Greek, and Standard Greek, where all the languages are presented in an equal and in an equal way. So he's involved in efforts to increase the awareness of teachers about Cypriot Turkish and how it can be used in an integrated way as a linguistic resource. So we're looking forward to your contribution, Ahmet. Welcome to our event tonight.
Thank you, Petros. Could you hear me? Is it okay?
Yes, we can, yeah.
All right. Let me share my screen. I think it's okay. Hello everybody. From Messaria, Lefkonigo, it's actually hot here. I hope you will tolerate me for the final presentation. I would like to thank the previous speakers for their valuable presentations, and of course, invitation of the Association for Bilingualism in Cyprus for Turkish Day. My presentation is based on didactic of Cypriot Turkish, and the subtitles are as follows. Why is it necessary or important to teach Cypriot Turkish? Current problems, research, efforts and projects, sorry, especially for me as a researcher, and other works issues. Teaching Cypriot Turkish is important for students to recognize the difference between spoken and written Turkish language used in Cyprus. Cypriot Turkish used in Cyprus has vital importance. It's obvious that languages and dialects are important for learning and maintaining cultural elements and values. It should be known that there is a strong connection between language and culture. Comparison is essential in linguistic studies. Teaching Cypriot Turkish is important in order to make sense of the folk literature products produced in past. Cypriot Turkish should be learned in order to make sense of Cypriot texts such as fairy tales, lullabies, and of course, in linguistics perspective, comparison is essential. By teaching Cypriot Turkish, new generations will be able to use the language. Thus, it will be possible to examine Cypriot Turkish in terms of linguistics. Contribution can be made to the literature in comparative linguistic studies, especially in terms of pragmatics and sociolinguistics. Teaching Cypriot Turkish is necessary for people of Turkish who come to Cyprus or foreigners who don't speak Turkish to understand what is exactly spoken in Cyprus. So what are the current problems? Cypriot Turkish is perceived as worthless because it has limited communication space, as it is known and used by everyone. For example, people who migrate to Cyprus from Turkey don't know, couldn't speak, and therefore cannot understand Cypriot Turkish. The use of Cypriot Turkish in official settings is avoided, and it is less respectable than standard Turkish. It is described as rude and ridiculous. Cypriot Turkish is not taught in schools for years. Language structure and rules are not described and written. Explanations about Cypriot Turkish vary from person to person. What about the scientific studies? Pehlivan's study, the standardization of Cypriot Turkish, is really interesting. And the results of that study, he found significant differences between generations in terms of knowing and using Cypriot Turkish items. The fact that the old people know and use more Cypriot Turkish and the young people prefer the language they see as standard instead show that there's a standardization in the dialect. In the other study, different findings were presented from Pehlivan's study, Öztürk, Argunşah, Demir, and Dumans. Unlike usage of dialects in Turkey, Cypriot Turkish has a respectable place in North Cyprus. In a study conducted with Cypriot primary school students on language acquisition, the reasons for deviations from written language is written expressions was the transfer of spoken language to written language. Even the Turks who settled on the island after 1974 show the effects of Cypriot Turkish. And this is different. And Dialects says studies, I think I don't need to summarize them again. They are really valuable and they are after 2015, very important studies for teaching and the attitudes of Cypriot Turkish. I'd like to say that. Yes, I want to continue with the efforts and projects of me as a Turkish language teaching specialist on teaching Cypriot Turkish. Ministry of Education project, Turkish language curriculum and course books project, and the other one is Association for Historical Dialogue and Research HDR project, which is daily speaking guide, Turkish, Greek, Cypriot Greek, and Cypriot Turkish. I'd like to introduce and talk about them. Turkish language curriculum, yes. In the Turkish language curriculum written in Northern Cyprus, of which I was one of the authors in 2018, it is stated as follows. Today, multiculturalism and multilingualism issues are emphasized in language teaching programs. Individuals who learn and use their own language effectively will be able to learn other language easily. In addition, it is cultural necessity to know Cypriot Turkish in Northern Cyprus and to keep it alive. From this point of view, effective learning outcomes are as important as cognitive learning outcomes in Turkish language curriculum in order to develop awareness for language. In purpose section of the curriculum, a statement about Cypriot Turkish was included for the first time, which is the aim of the Turkish language curriculum is to educate students who use Turkish correctly and effectively, respect other language in the context of national and universal values and dialect features here, especially, and generally have awareness, love, and sensitivity to use for language. If we look program outcomes include three main titles: language skills, literature, usage, and awareness of Turkish language. The curriculum outcomes in language awareness are as follows. Give importance the Cypriot culture and Cypriot Turkish. Respects other cultures, languages, and dialects. Respects Turkish language and shows sensitivity to use. The learning outcome respects the Cypriot culture and Cypriot Turkish includes the following acquisitions. Realizing that Turkish spoken in Cyprus has become unique feature on the basis of phonetics, morphology, vocabulary, and recognizing Cypriot Turkish. Using Cypriot Turkish words and language structures in daily speech and communication. Creating a dictionary by using the words in Cypriot Turkish, recognizing the Cypriot culture and realizing the relationship between Cypriot Turkish and Cypriot culture, revealing the characteristics of Cypriot culture and dialect in folk literature texts, realizing that Cypriot Turkish varies from region to region within Cyprus, and this is really important, another outcome. The following acquisitions are included in the compares her own culture and dialect characteristics with related and close cultures learning outcome, revealing the similarities and differences between Cypriot culture and other countries' cultures, recognizing different countries where Turkish is used and Turkish dialects, interpreting why Cypriot Turkish is different from standard Turkish and other dialects, giving examples of languages and dialects that affect Cypriot Turkish, displaying the differences of Turkish with sound, form, sentence structure of Cypriot Turkish, and giving examples of words used in Cypriot Turkish but not included in standard Turkish. What about yes, here is a page from Turkish language curriculum. Course books. There are generally 7 themes in Turkish course books from 1st grade to 8th grade. And the second themes of the all books is my country and my cultural values. In this theme, I mean the second theme, there are literary texts in which Cypriot Turkish is used. Turkish Cypriot writers and poets are introduced and their language and style are given. The usage of Cypriot Turkish are taught through language activities. And here you can see some activities from the course book. They are going to find some Cypriot Turkish words and then what are their meanings in standard Turkish. And they are going to draw the Cypriot Turkish words. This is an activity from class 2. Yes, the other project, Daily Speaking Guide project, is really important for us, as Petros talked before for introducing me. I'd like to show you a short video from this project. It's only 1 minute, I think. Once a second.
ουσία της επικοινωνίας είναι η πρόθεση. Να μην χτίζουμε τύπους, αλλά γέφυρες.
İletişim, insanlar birbirimizin dilini konuşarak ve birbirimizi anlayarak bunu güçlendirebiliriz.
Yes. The handbook written in this project, based on 13 topics, commonly used in standard Greek, Cypriot Greek, standard Turkish, and Cypriot Turkish dialects, such as introducing yourself, others, our home, daily activities, food and drink. Yes. Dialogues of 2 languages and also 2 dialects are included in this project book. Thus, 4 ways of usage are presented simultaneously. How to introduce the letters used in each language is shown in reading guide. In addition to the sentence patterns in the dialogues. There are words section, grammar section, and language exercise section related to each theme. The words section contains words related to each topic, as well as additional vocabulary information about same topic. And the grammar section includes the standard patterns of Greek and Turkish, as well as additional information about Greek and Turkish dialects spoken in Cyprus. Dialects used in certain regions in Cyprus may not have been given a large place, but it doesn't mean that the dialects or dialects specific to these regions are not valid. Let's look, here is a page from that, yes, project book. As you see, we give dialogue sentences like napan, nasılsın, naparsınız, nasılsınız. Sorry, I couldn't read the Greek ones. I should learn. Other works and issues are really interesting. Cypriot Turkish in social media by creating groups on social media, sites example in Facebook, the meanings of the words and sentence patterns used in Cypriot Turkish are discussed. Do you know Gatrish? Gatriaba is really important and funny character. Gatrish character created by Mahmut Anayasa to make political criticism in social media. And good to see some literary studies like stories and poetry books. Well-known books are rewritten in Cypriot Turkish. For example, Little Prince was rewritten in Cypriot Turkish, and about a COVID book by Çağrı Peköz. It is also translated in Cypriot Turkish. I really like it. Dictionaries of Cypriot Turkish, you know, they are very valuable. Etymological dictionary from Orhan Kabataş. There are some works of Mustafa Gökçeoğlu, proverbs, idioms, and also Cypriot Turkish dictionary from Bener Hakkı Hakeri. The other works, such as theaters about Cypriot Turkish. There are theater plays, especially performed by Alper Susuzlu from Famagusta. Cypriot Turkish is also used in theater plays by Özden Selenge. Making publications and writing articles in media using Turkish, Cypriot Turkish. Here you can see Sami Özuslu, who presents a news program about the morning agenda on Sim TV and asks the sentence patterns and words in Cypriot Turkish and gives place to the comments and memories of the audience. And Avrupa newspaper, some journalists use Cypriot Turkish in this newspaper. This is very interesting. Mehmet Ekin Vaiz and Gülşen Erçin create funny and critical advertisements in Cypriot Turkish for television and media. Conclusion. For awareness and education of Cypriot Turkish, I think informal education outside of schools is just as important as formal education, I think. And it is very important not to reduce Cypriot Turkish just for joy, to slang or swearing language. This is very important, I think. And we need more scientific studies especially for teaching of Cypriot Turkish, and more projects for developing teaching materials and training teachers. Improving the quality of Turkish language curriculum and course books in North Cyprus is really important for teaching Cypriot Turkish better. And of course, the informal education policies, media, artistic works like literature, theater, cinema are very important. And using social media effectively is really important. Yes. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Ahmed, and thank you for this very informative, illustrative, and
yes, informative. So it's a little different from the other speakers.
And thanks to all our speakers. So let me congratulate all four of you for your excellent contributions tonight. And I would like now to open the floor to questions from our audience. You're most welcome to post your questions in the chat, and we will read them and the speakers will answer. So I guess I can perhaps kick off while people are gathering their thoughts. I have one question for Cisse and Ahmed and one question for Hassan and Maria, I guess. So the question for Ahmed and Cisse is, could you say a little bit more about how sort of social and political developments in Cyprus affect the attitudes of people towards Cypriot Turkish? So how do these go hand in hand with what's happening politically in Cyprus, and also with what's happening south of the Green Line? And the question for Hassan and Maria will be that are you aware of any initiatives in your respective sites of research, so in Thrace and Rhodes, about valorizing the local varieties of Turkish compared to standard Turkish that is taught in minority education? So in Cyprus, we've seen a lot of these efforts to say to people that Cypriot Turkish is a legitimate variety of language, but is there anything like that happening in Thrace and Rhodes? So Hassan and Maria, you have some time to think about it, but Cisse and Ahmed have no time. So Cisse and Ahmed, can I have your answers to the political and social question, please?
Sure. Shall I start, Ahmed or John?
Yes, sure.
Well, obviously, attitudes are very prone to social and historical events, and especially political agendas as well. And like I said in the presentation, language use, language practices are very, very important for Cypriots to express their identities. And whenever you see a certain policy or a certain political agenda, whenever they feel like their identity is being attacked in an attempt to Turkify them, if you like, they bring forward the language issue. As I said during the presentation, the opening of the borders in 2004 was a major event, and you can see from the people's attitudes, the research done before 2004 highly prioritize standard Turkish and admire the speakers, while after that time, there seems to be a shift towards a more positive attitude towards Cypriotness and Cypriot dialects and Cypriot language. Now, with respect to the South, I haven't observed anything similar to the policies affecting the Cypriot Turkish or Turkish Cypriots' reaction to Turkification. So if there's something that they don't like in the South, they still express themselves in Cypriot Turkish, but they don't try to move towards standard in any way in that sense. However, you can still see the effects of that long period of admiration, because a lot of people feel that they will not sound educated if they speak Cypriot. people like Sami Özuslu and Mehmet Ekin Vaiz, these people are really advocating for the language, for the dialects, and they are showing people that it is possible to do serious business, to be in media, to present the morning news in Cypriot Turkish, and it's fine, and they are still respected. So in that sense, we see that, and they are reacting to all these political and social changes in Cypriot Turkish through their media. And I think such figures are influencing people in a positive way in terms of adopting more and more and keeping Cypriot elements of their language instead of moving towards standard.
Thank you, Giselle. Ahmed, what is your take? Because obviously you're
Yes,
working
it's really difficult for changing minds of nationalist people in North Side, I think. For that reason, instead of teaching some cognitive issues to students, we should focus on especially the attitudes, like she said about it. I really give importance. How can we change the students' minds? I mean, their attitudes to prefer to use Cypriot Turkish. And really, it's unbelievable that some nationalist people in North Side reject to hear or see any Cypriot Turkish words in curriculums and course books, and we are fighting with them. I show you some words from the course books and curriculums, and it's really difficult for us to put them. We really fight for that. But we start doing something, and we are going to change the minds. But I think bi-communal projects, dear Duri and Petros, are really important for doing something for Cypriot Greek and Cypriot Turkish. We can do bi-communal projects and give importance to dialects. I am really happy for the daily speaking guide project. I think we manage something and we will do more. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you. And I agree. I think you say you're fighting with people who don't agree with our views, but I think that curriculum that you showed is a great step. I mean, we haven't seen this in many places, and we haven't seen this in the south of the island, where there's been a lot of reaction to introducing Cypriot Greek, and not in this way in which you managed to do it in your curriculum. So congratulations for this amazing.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hassan and Maria, what's happening in Rhodes and Thrace with respect to recognizing the local varieties of Turkish? Maria, would you like to say that?
Shall I?
Yes, Maria, please.
I'm not really sure if I am up to date with what's now, but what is happening there when I was there, it's very, I had the impression. Actually struggling to get a better standard Turkish. We are not satisfied with the school. They have this need to be able to speak better the standard language. So I don't evaluating local variety and talking with people there. I almost always had the impression that they believe that their variety is something like a wrong variety of standard Turkish. So I think it will take years to arrive in this level to do something for the Western Thrace Turkish. But they are at school sometimes. I know that they are playing theater in the local variety or in some local radio stations. They speak the collective, at least a variety. So they are talking in it, not always in standard Turkish, but nothing so officially for the schools.
Thank you, Maria. Yeah, it's something that might need to be done because there's been so many projects in Thrace with the Turkish in terms of that might be a step. From Rhodes, your context.
Actually, it is totally different because there's no literacy. People try to maintain their language, but this is it. I only can say that in some cases, those who travel to Turkey would prefer to know the standard so that they do not face any problems. But the situation is very different. We cannot speak of education. There's no education. It is totally oral. So I don't know what can be done.
So are there no schools in Rhodes or like in Thrace or?
No, there are not. There are only informal efforts or personal training, but nothing more.
I guess because it's not covered by the treaty, I guess. So
yes, and it's not official.
Yeah, thank you.
But that is very interesting because you would imagine that just like a diasporic community, they would try to set up their own schools, like the ones in the UK, for example, for the Saturday schools or Sunday schools or things like that. It's very interesting that there has been no effort in that sense. Maybe
there are efforts, but still it's political.
Right, yes.
Thank you. Other questions, comments, thoughts?
Hassan, I would like to know if the dialect spoken in the Rhodos is also a symbol of identity.
Yeah, it is. It is. It is directly connected, mostly to elders. Youngers do not pay that much attention to it, but elders do.
And what about the relations with Kos? Because I understand there's also a Turkish-speaking community in Kos Island. Is that correct?
Yes, but there are not strong ties. Islands are isolated, so there is an association, a cultural association, but still the ties are not so strong.
I see. Thank you, Hassan. Certainly a lot more to be done about the communities. Both we see it's interesting how different power dynamics in each setting have a different impact on the language. So even though Cypriot Turkish has been talked about as less powerful with respect to standardized Turkish, we see how in Rhodos and in Thrace it's even less supported institutionally, and definitely not by the Greek state as it should be. I think we've gone slightly over time, only by 20 minutes, and I think that's an achievement for an event organized by us people. So I think if it's okay with Durier, I think we can bring this evening to a close.
Yes, I think it's time. Thank you, everyone here.
Okay, so let me thank everyone again for your contribution. It's been excellent. So again, happy Turkish Language Day and happy Bayram to all of those who are celebrating today and tomorrow. And we hope to see you again soon in another event of the Association for Bilingualism in Cyprus. Have a good evening. Goodbye from me. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.